Hello, hi, what's up everyone? It's me, Kiran, your favorite booktuber, and today we are here on January 2nd to talk about my favorite top 10 best nonfiction books of 2023. I read a lot of nonfiction this year. I literally had my nonfiction moment, and I think that will continue. I think about of the 117 books I read, 30%-ish, like give or take, whatever. About 30% or so was nonfiction, and the nonfiction books that I read, most of them were really good. Would recommend. 10 out of 10. But today we're here to talk about the best of the best, the top of the line. You really need this. You should read it. Let's get to it. Okay, the first book we're going to talk about is Travels with Myself and Another by Martha Gellhorn. For those of you who don't know, Martha Gellhorn was Hemingway's third wife, but she was more than just a wife. She was a journalist, a novelist, and she traveled quite a bit in her life. And so this book in particular is her reflections on 5 trips that she went on. We're covering Russia, the Caribbean, Africa, China, and one other place. And basically what she's doing is she's like kind of looking through, parsing through those experiences and kind of pulling out the bad. And she's really kind of delving into that. But I would say that she writes with clarity and humor, and just the force of her personality really carries you through the book. It's phenomenal and such a great little portrait of travel at that time, though I would say there are a few things that are a little off about some of her descriptions, but I would definitely recommend it because it just made me laugh, and it's something that I still think about quite often. Next up, we have Seduction and Betrayal by Elizabeth Hardwick. These are a collection of essays looking at women in literature, and I'd have to say that it is phenomenal criticism. It is very digestible, engaging, interesting. She fuses the personal with literature and really gives you a lot to mull over as we're looking at the writings of Virginia Woolf, Zelda Fitzgerald, the Bronte sisters. I just thought it was a marvelous read if you're interested in literature criticism. Third on my list, we have Kingdom of Prep, which is all about J. Crew, but it's not just about J. Crew. The author is also looking at shopping culture, I guess you could say, in America. So she takes us from the catalogs to malls, but she also touches upon the other brands that were big at the moment. So Calvin Klein, Ralph Lauren, The Gap, all of that stuff. I think if you're interested in retail, consumerism, culture, whatever, you'll really enjoy it. Next up, let's talk about Prairie Fires. I forgot the full name of it because I'm just working off of the list that I wrote on paper. So Prairie Fires is looking at Laura Ingalls Wilder's her life, kind of getting to the root of truth, because Laura Ingalls Wilder, who was the author of Little House on the Prairie and all of those fabulous children's books, she was a really interesting woman, and you wouldn't expect that. Like, I didn't know that going into it, but then you read the book and you're just like, wow, there's a lot more to parse through and dissect. Laura Ingalls Wilder, towards the end of her life, gave a speech where she was like, the books that I wrote were the truth, but they weren't the whole truth. That's a paraphrase of the quote, FYI, but she said something very similar to that. And so the author's really digging into that, getting to the bottom of what is the truth of Laura Ingalls Wilder's life. And so she's looking at the family, how they came out to the prairie, her time there, and then things get really interesting. Well, all of it, throughout all of it, right? But it's really interesting also because once Laura gives birth to Rose and Rose grows up, you see their relationship, and it was kind of a very codependent relationship, very fraught. Rose was wild, but Rose was kind of an intense personality from what I could tell. She at one hand felt really sheltered by her parents, but also wanted to escape them, and they just had this very interesting relationship. And I think you really come away from it being like, Laura was such a strong woman and led such an interesting life, and you learn a lot also about like American ideas of Western expansion, manifest destiny, self-sufficiency. Those ideas, like, you'll have extra context on understanding those ideas upon reading the book. Next up, this is a book that I did earlier in the year. It's called Children of Ash and Elm, and this is a deep dive into Vikings. It was awesome. I, at one point during the pandemic, was listening to 2 podcasts. One of them was a history of Vikings, where in each episode, the podcast host would be interviewing historians or whatever, and just like going deep into a particular issue. So I was like learning a lot about very niche specific things. This is a more comprehensive understanding of what we actually know about the Vikings. So you just learn a lot. It was really fabulous. I loved it a lot. You kind of you look at the Vikings through the lens of like economics, their warmongering, but also what was it like to be a woman in the Viking context, and what rights did they have. And it's quite interesting to see how these women they had a lot of business like prowess. And then you also learn more about Viking burials. There's this one description that's taken from an Arabic traveler's journals, where he happened to look at a Viking burial, the kind that happens like on the boat. And the description is so intense, so violent, so unexpected, so like hedonistic and crazy. I still think about that. So I would recommend this book if you are not, even if you're not interested in Vikings, like check it out. Next up, we have Sha of Shas. Now this is a really interesting piece of nonfiction because our author was a journalist, but he was also a fan of editorializing, and he happened to find himself in Iran kind of at the cusp of the revolution, and then I think he was there for part of the revolution, and he is fusing together reality, fiction, what's actually happening, the truth, but gives it a really interesting spin because he likes to editorialize. So there's almost a bit of creative writing that gets involved, but he writes about it in a very cinematic way that makes you really have a very visual experience of what he's describing. He starts by talking about how he's alone in a hotel room and the only people there are the employees, and they're all listening to the radio, and it's a really unique way to tackle investigative journalism, or just like being a journalist. I thought it was something that gave me a lot of questions and was really interesting. I definitely have used that word a lot, so please forgive me. Next up, we have We Don't Know Ourselves. I think this was by O'Toole, someone whose last name is O'Toole. So this is a look at Ireland's modern history. Our author fuses details from his personal life, but not in an annoying way, okay? Like, I think the details and the anecdotes that he provides actually add a lot of context to it, because he's able to kind of show how the events of modern Ireland, the IRA, things like that, how they affected the everyman and like his various family members. But he's really talking about religion, immigration, the exodus of Ireland's youth as they try to get jobs throughout the world, and then like JFK and what he meant. And this was just really nuanced and a very layered picture of Ireland. And I think if you don't know a lot about Ireland's history, this would be a really great primer, because it does cover so much and is very just rich with detail. I honestly kind of want to reread it. That's how good I thought it was. Okay, next we're moving on to Lives of the Wives. This was a group biography looking at the marriages of 5 different literary couples from like about the 20th century. And this was an incredibly gossipy book, super gossipy. It was great. Like, I really enjoyed it. The author is looking at these marriages, seeing what sacrifices various partners needed to make, and just what marriage does to people, which I thought was really interesting. Then in a similar vein, we have Baby on the Fireplace, which is another kind of group biography looking at different female artists and their relationship with motherhood, and how they toggled motherhood and being an artist and also being a woman. So like navigating those 3 different things and the different ways that these women created a life for themselves, which enabled them to still keep their art at the forefront of their lives. And not only does she really center these women, but she will also talk about other women who were prominent at the same time as they were, and kind of see the different ways that they were navigating the same problems, but tackling it different because of their economic circumstances, or maybe just the culture, the vibes, whatever. Finally, the last book, we have Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, I think his name is. I read this twice. Like, I did it once, and then I was like, there was so much knowledge, there were so much thoughts about social media and technology consumption. I need this one more time. So I listened to it twice. This is a book where our author is kind of one of those slightly self-helpy books-ish, but like not. So our author is talking about, has the premise that technology should be working for you. And for most of us, technology is not working for us. It is imbued in our life. It is so integral, such a big part of so many of our lives, but we're not actually optimizing it to actually get the most out of tech. So as a result of that, he suggests, going on a digital detox and establishing a philosophy of how to use tech and social such that you can thrive and have a great life. There's also a lot of conversations about, solitude and the importance of walking. And I just thought it was phenomenal. Would recommend it to everyone because we all do use phones and social media. Okay, that's a wrap with my 2023 top 10 best nonfiction reads. I think I wanted to say in the beginning that I think nonfiction is wonderful, and though a lot of people I think don't necessarily love nonfiction, it's definitely worth checking out because whatever your interest is, whether you're interested in history or Vikings, something random, motherhood, you can find good, great nonfiction writing, and once you kind of stumble upon that, you will be a convert, I'd like to say. So once you find your gateway drug to nonfiction writing, I think you'll be hooked for life. I hope that of these lists, these are 10 books that I read that I thought were great, and they kind of cover a different range of stuff. So hopefully you can find something that you like. I would love to know in the comments what your best nonfiction 2023 read was, or if you have any suggestions for me, because I would love that. And with that, I will see you in the next video.